Okay, and so it's good to see everybody this evening for another edition of Jews in the News. I want to let everybody know all of the classes, the adult education classes that I offer, like this, Jews in the News and Talmud class and Bible class and Torah study. All those classes are going to end for summer break at Memorial Day weekend. So that and next Monday is the first Monday in May, so that means it's a board meeting, so we don't have a session then. So the 12th and the 19th are our next sessions. The 26th is Memorial Day, so we will not have a session that evening. So the 12th and the 19th are our next two and last sessions for this academic year. On the 12th, we're going to have a guest, rabbinical student Ariel Dunat, who was with us in November, is going to be with us for the next Jews in the News session to talk about rabbinical school today and the challenges facing the conservative movement in the future. So that should be interesting. We couldn't figure out a time on a Shabbat that worked with Ariel's schedule and our schedule, so Jews in the News look to be a good way to do that. So that should be interesting. That's our next session on May 12th. What I wanted to talk about tonight is this guest essay by none other than comedian and award-winning comedian Larry David. This brief essay, which I'll share my screen in a moment, is really fascinating. I thought it was very well written, extremely well done. And it raises the point. It's it's a satire, a piece about my dinner with Adolf, imagining what it would be like if one disagrees with a leader's policies, knowing that the leader's policies not only are objectionable, not like Democrat versus Republican, but more objectionable to someone's opinions, racist, bigoted, dangerous. What if that person invited you to dinner? Would you go? So, it reflects kind of an idea that there's that something that came out by this I think a Lutheran minister. They came for the gypsies, and I didn't stand up, and no one was there. No one stood, and no one cared. They came for the Catholics. I didn't stand up, but they came for me, and there was nobody there for me. I'm butchering it, but you know what I'm talking about. So, what is the line in which beyond which we start speaking up, and that, what's our line in the sand that pushes us that pushes us to the point where we can't we have to say no, and we have to stand up. How far does objectionable ideas have to, like, how intense do ideas have to be objectionable before we say no, we will not do this? So let me share my screen, and let's look at this piece, and then we can share some ideas about it and thoughts after. So, my dinner with Adolf, Larry David. And I didn't write when this came out, but it came out last week in the New York Times. So you may have read it already, may not. Okay. Imagine my surprise when, in the spring of 1939, a letter arrived at my house inviting me to dinner at the old chancellery with the world's most reviled man, Adolf Hitler. I had been a vocal critic of his on the radio from the beginning, pretty much predicting everything he was going to do on the road to dictatorship. No one I knew encouraged me to go. He's Hitler. He's a monster. But eventually I concluded that hate gets us nowhere. I knew I couldn't change his views, but we need to talk to the other side, even if it has invaded and annexed other countries and committed unspeakable crimes against humanity. Now, before I go on, I just want to say, you know, clearly he's writing this as a mockery of this. It's meant to be satire. And so just the idea, how do enemy countries sit down to talk to each other, right? In other words, I think all of us would agree that there needs to be peace in the Middle East, right? And so we all pray for the day when Israel can live at peace with its neighbors. Well, how does peace get accomplished? Does peace get accomplished by Israel's army continuing to bombard Gaza? That's not a political comment about what's happening in Gaza now, but just does peace happen at the by means of destruction, or can peace happen by means of dialogue? Okay, so when Yitzhak Rabin shook Yasser Arafat's hand after signing the Oslo Accords with President Clinton in the Rose Garden in 1993, the idea that these two people who represent countries, who represent people, who have had age-old disagreements, but also hatred of the other, were willing to sit down and sign a piece of paper to begin a process towards peace. All right, so the idea that you can't ever sit down with your enemy, I'm not so sure that that is an idea that we want to project. Meaning that there are people who will refuse ever to sit down with their enemy. And because of that, hatred continues, hatred and distrust and war and violence continues to the next generation. All right, so I just want to make that clear as I finish this paragraph, that at what point do you have to say, okay, enough with the hatred, let's sit down and talk? Okay. 2 weeks later, I found myself on the front steps of the old chancellery and was led into an opulent living room where a few of the Führer's most vocal supporters had gathered: Himmler, Göring, Leni Riefenstahl, and the Duke of Windsor, formerly King Edward VIII. We talked about some of the beautiful art on the walls that had been taken from the homes of Jews. But our conversation ended abruptly when we heard loud footsteps coming down the hallway. Everyone stiffened as Hitler entered the room. He was wearing a tan suit with a swastika armband and gave me an enthusiastic greeting that caught me off guard. Frankly, it was a warmer greeting than I normally get from my parents, and it was accompanied by a slap on my back. I found the whole thing quite disarming. I joked that I was surprised to see him in a tan suit, because if he wore that out, it would be perceived as un-Führer-like. That amused him to no end, and I realized I'd never seen him laugh before. Suddenly, he seemed so human. Here I was, prepared to meet Hitler, the one I'd seen and heard, the public Hitler. But this private Hitler was a completely different animal. And oddly enough, this one seemed more authentic, like this was the real Hitler. The whole thing had my head spinning. He said he was starving and led us into the dining room, where he gestured for me to sit next to him. Goring immediately grabbed a slice of pumpernickel, whereupon Hitler turned to me, gave me an eye roll, then whispered, "Watch. He'll be done with his entire meal before you've taken 2 bites." That one really got me. Goring, with his mouth full, asked what was so funny, and Hitler said I was just telling him about the time my dog had diarrhea in the Reichstag. Goring remembered. How could he forget? He loved that story, especially the part where Hitler shot the dog before it got back into the car. Then a beaming Hitler said, "Hey, if I can kill Jews, gypsies, and homosexuals, I can certainly kill a dog." That perhaps got the biggest laugh of the night, and believe me, there were plenty. But it wasn't just a one-way street, with the Führer dominating the conversation. He was quite inquisitive and asked me a lot of questions about myself. I told him I had just gone through a brutal breakup with my girlfriend because every time I went someplace without her, she was always insistent that I tell her everything I talked about. I can't stand having to remember every detail of every conversation. Hitler said he could relate. He hated that too. What am I, a secretary? He advised me it was, so if you know Larry David, you know that this is exactly the way he talks, right? If you've watched any Curb Your Enthusiasm or Seinfeld. He advised me it was best not to have any more contact with her, or else I'd be right back where I started, and eventually I'd have to go through the whole thing all over again. I said it must be easy for a dictator to go through a breakup. He said you'd be surprised. There are still feelings. There are still feelings. That really resonated with me. We're not that different after all. I thought that if only the world could see this side of him, people might have a completely different opinion. 2 hours later, the dinner was over, and the Führer escorted me to the door. I am so glad to have met you. I hope I'm no longer the monster you thought I was. I must say, mein Führer, I'm so thankful I came. Although we disagree on many issues, it doesn't mean that we have to hate each other. And with that, I gave him a Nazi salute and walked out into the night. So, like I said, I thought this was pretty powerful and not something that I would expect from Larry David. Not familiar with him writing anything political like this before. And I think it's pretty meaningful to me about how easy it is to be turned by someone's charm and because of the power that they wield, and how easy it is to fall under their temptation. And then 2 weeks before, he says he would never have imagined accepting the invitation, and he walks out the door after the dinner giving a Nazi salute. So, so again, my reaction to this is just the whole idea of how we deal with bigotry, discrimination, anti-Semitism in our society. And that when leaders profess these racist and bigoted views, when leaders make it policy, how easy it is to understand why people don't put up a fight, because it's coming from the leader. People tend to trust their leaders to do what is right for good, for the best of the country. People trust their leaders that they represent the values of the country because they became leader because they got the majority of the vote. So there's lots of undercurrents, and also, the anti-Semitism, the rabid anti-Semitism that Hitler professed and acted upon was based on centuries of anti-Semitism in Europe. So Hitler didn't create any of the anti-Semitic tropes. He didn't create any of the anti-Semitic propaganda, literature, he just expanded upon what was already there as an undercurrent, if not a major part of European society. If you've seen the play Leopoldstadt that was on Broadway last year, you know how Jewish families throughout so-called civilized democratic Europe try to fit in, understanding there was a polite form of anti-Semitism which was accepted in society in Europe. And how did Jews respond who wanted to be part of that society? So some converted to Christianity, some totally neglected their Jewish identity without converting. They tried in different ways to fit in, understanding that there was absolutely no way to 100% as a Jew fit into European society. But so Hitler played upon that and, like I said, didn't create anything new, just expanded upon it to the nth degree and to the point that 6 million of our brothers and sisters were brutally murdered. So, racist ideology is that is rampant today around the world is not new. It's just that there's an outlet for it because leaders of countries are professing it and are allowing these feelings, thoughts, ideas to have a foothold in society today. So from this example of Larry David's letter of one person being invited to the despicable Hitler's home as an example of how one person at a time gets influenced and kind of switches to the dark side of racism, how easy it is for us to switch that way, and how hard it is to switch the other way, right? In other words, it's easy to switch to the side of hate when the leader of the country is leaning in that direction and encouraging other people to go in that direction. It's rare that a leader of a country professes love and harmony and values like that. Often leaders like that end up assassinated. President Kennedy, Martin Luther King, Robert Kennedy, etc., etc. So, I'm not intending to overgeneralize and simplify this whole conversation in this way. I'm just saying that this piece by Larry David struck me. I thought it was well written. I thought it made an extremely important point about how easy it is to be influenced and how hard it is to stand up to what is clearly and obviously hatred and so any thoughts or comments?
Jonah,
Yes.
I don't think he was just because he said that, oh, he gave Hitler the Nazi salute. I don't think he was brought over to his way of thinking, though.
So here's the thing. I hadn't heard about this before, but apparently when Larry David's letter came out, immediately the New York Times, where it was published, also said this is a response to what another
To
comedian,
Trump,
Bill,
to
what?
Trump having a comedian over for dinner.
Yes, that's right. And Bill Maher, who has a show on HBO, talked about being invited to Mar-a-Lago, I guess, for a dinner, and he accepted the invitation, and he found Trump to be a nice guy. something like that. So,
Yeah.
so that's what Larry David was responding to. How, in other words, how do you even accept the invitation? And how do you allow yourself to say, you know, you know, I guess it's this. If you see if you so again, I don't want to make this political. I do want to say though, we develop our opinion about politicians based on what they say and what they do, right? So we can have our opinion about President Biden. We can have our opinion about President Obama. We can have our opinion about President Trump. It's based on what they say and what they do. Okay? So if you have an opinion that you are disgusted by the current president, then why be a hypocrite and accept an invitation to his house for dinner? Right? Like there are the presidents have hosted Hanukkah parties at the White House. And I would have imagined if I were invited ever to the Hanukkah party at the White House, would I go? If I was invited by President Clinton or President Obama, sure, I would go. If I were invited by the current president, would I go? I would like to say that I would not go personally. So I'm speaking personally. I'm not speaking as the rabbi of Shaarei Tefillah congregation. I'm speaking personally as Jonah Lehman, American Jew who votes in elections. I disagree with President Trump's policies. It would be hypocritical of me to go. And I would say at this point that being invited to the White House, certainly I'm not invited as, I would not be invited. So I've never been invited and I don't expect to be invited. But if I'm invited as the rabbi of Shaarei Tefillah congregation. So I would think that I would at least, in this point, talk to the president of the congregation and say, what do you think I should do? I don't want to go. Is it okay if I don't go? Okay, so recognizing that it's not completely a personal decision, but because it's the fact of what my job is that I would get invited, not because of who I am as a person. So I guess if I, Rabbi Jonah Lehman of Shaarei Tefillah congregation, happen to be independently wealthy and gave $1 million to President Trump's campaign, then I would imagine I'd be invited to the White House as Jonah Lehman and not as Rabbi Jonah Lehman of Shaarei Tefillah. Okay, so you get my point. So the point is, don't be what Larry David is saying. Don't be hypocritical. If you are professing an opinion and have an opinion based on what Trump has said and what he does, then what's the point of going? Because it's there's no way that Trump is going to be different in private than he is in public, and that you shouldn't give in or show in any way that you're. So it's one thing to like a Democrat to go to a Republican's home back in the day when Democrats and Republicans could respect each other despite their differences. It's one thing for a Democrat to go to a Republican home or a Republican to go to a Democrat home. That's not like neither one would say about the other they're anti-American or they're evil people. People are now saying that the president's policies are evil. And so if you're saying then that if you yourself say that the president's policies are evil, then you're being hypocritical to have dinner with such an evil person. Bob, unmute.
Well, I know you said let's not make it political.
I'm trying not to. I'm
Trying
trying.
to direct it at me, but I'm not going to go there. It just
Yes,
when Bill Maher made his summary of the dinner, he said, "Look, I make fun of him. I don't like his policies, but we had a reasonable conversation."
right.
And he did point out, hey, you did this and you did this. This was wrong. You're scaring people. So he was not, he didn't drink all the Kool-Aid,
Uh-huh.
but I do think that Trump is a part performer and he can snow people. And that was my view. But his point was we have to talk. We can't always be like this.
So again, I just wonder whether there comes a point where the talking clearly will not have any effect anymore. So I don't know. I don't know. In theory, I would say yes, it would be appropriate to talk and have a conversation to try to see where is this person coming from, and is there any way in which to understand that and see if there's a chance of any kind of common ground in any way. So I guess the idea is it's one thing Democrat Republican who back in the day when they respected each other to have conversations like that. That nobody would say you're a traitor, you're a hypocrite for having a conversation with the other side. Today, it's gotten to the point where people would say that, and that people I think are so, and with the help of social media in which there are no filters, that people are just so strident in their opinion that it's nearly impossible for people to actually see the value of the other side. So, in other words, I think the art of having a discussion about, like debate societies, the art of having a debate society in which a debate team has to stand for a position or against a position, which even though the person might agree or disagree with that, try to find academically and reasonably and logically a way to support or criticize the particular opinion, right? You can have an academic discussion, understanding that there's a validity to both sides of the argument. Now, there's certain things like racism that you shouldn't be able to, everybody should agree that racism is wrong. So there are certain topics, I don't know, there's certain topics that you might say that it's okay to have a discussion about. And if you have an opinion somebody has one opinion, somebody has a completely different opinion, it doesn't mean then that the people with different opinions are evil. But it's gotten to the point now where people can't see that. And people see each other as evil and stupid and call each other worse names than that. And so if you accept, and so the president, who also owns a social media company and posts on his own social media platform, clearly then is not, doesn't intend to have a different opinion than the one that he continues to post and talk about. So I don't know then that Bill Maher was, I think he was naive in going and thinking that he might have an impact, as opposed to realistically knowing that this is not the climate yet to be able to have a reasoned conversation. Sean.
So I was going to make the comment just before you did about the social media
Yes.
and just the impact of social media, people putting out their opinions, and if you argue something, you just get attacked by people. If
Right.
you go against someone, and some of the things that get put out are just so hateful. It's unbelievable to me.
Right.
It's so much different than it used to be,
Right.
the way it is now. And
Right.
I just hope it doesn't keep getting worse.
Well, yeah, I can't imagine how it can get worse because it is pretty bad now. So I don't see it personally because when I go on social media for me is just Facebook, and I go on Facebook just to see what's new in the lives of my friends. friends in air quotes, the people who I have friended or accepted friend requests from on Facebook just to see what's going on in their lives. That's the only reason I'm on Facebook. And in fact, I unfriended one or two people when all they were posting was political things, especially things that I disagreed with. So I have no interest in reading comments that people share about other people's posts. I just don't do that. So I'm not on Instagram, I'm not on X, I'm not on TikTok. I just don't do that because I understand the rabbit hole that is, and that once you get sucked in, it's hard to get out. And the
See, but
damage, yeah,
one thing in that regard that I feel the same way, but the younger people, like I have, two daughters in their
right,
20s. They're on Facebook. They're not on
right,
Facebook that much anymore. It's, Instagram and all these other things. And I'm just worried about how they get impacted by the stuff that they hear and see more
right.
than people of our age get
So
impacted
then
by it.
I will say, and I want to find the right forum to speak at length about this. There's a book that came out last year called The Anxious Generation. It's all about your kids, Sean, and not just your kids personally, but the
Right. Yeah.
generation of your kids, anybody born after 1995. From 1995 on, anybody born then, they are the anxious generation, according to this author. Last name is Haid, as in David, T as in Tom. It's an important book for everybody to read, for educators to read, parents to read, everybody to read. Just the impact of the smartphone on
Mm-hmm.
this generation's life, and the impact of social media, unrestricted, uncensored social media on the lives of these people. So, but that's a conversation for another time. Frida.
So, the issue that I have, I'm all for conversation, communication in my world, which is a reasonable world,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
That is one that, it works, right?
Right.
The issue that I have is a trust issue.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. How do you sit at a table where,
Mm-hmm.
not knowing what you can trust? We've seen in today's political environment, in past political environments,
Mm-hmm.
where, there are promises that are made and they're broken,
Right.
in what's going on in Israel and,
Mm-hmm.
in Gaza right now.
Right.
How can you sit across
Right.
from someone and negotiate and have any type of reasonable conversation because there's lack of trust?
Right. Right. So you're absolutely right. And that's what I started with about how enemies can sit down and talk. And how does that work? So, it's one thing after World War II, or even after World War One, where Germany was clearly the loser. And when it came to the Versailles Treaty at the end of World War One or at the end of World War II, clear who's the winner, who's the loser, and then the winners decide how the loser is supposed to suffer, and new borders and things like that. So it's one thing. But on the other hand, like Israel and the Palestinians, so like with the Oslo Accords in 1993, so tremendous debate in Israeli society as to whether to even sit down and talk to these people. But at the same time, and this is before the Intifada, right? So there's still the experience of all the wars since 1948 until 1993. Enough already, most Israelis were saying. If they're willing to sit down and talk to us, let's take advantage and talk to them. Like when Anwar Sadat said he wanted to come to Israel in 1977, that was like a miracle. And I remember it was Shabbat in Eastern time, Saturday night, when Sadat's plane landed in Tel Aviv. We were watching TV. We had just come home from shul. I remember this clearly, watching Sadat land. Unbelievable, the red carpet treatment. And you sing this Air Egypt plane that had just taxied, and there he is, the president of Egypt, who just had waged the Yom Kippur War 4 years before, coming to Israel, shaking Menachem Begin's hand. What a remarkable picture. Unbelievable. So, there are times in which enemies can say, okay, let's try to, we're not going to forget what happened before, but let's now talk about the future. All right, so it takes tremendous bravery to do that. And you see what happened. Sadat got assassinated for it, and Yitzhak Rabin got assassinated for it. So it takes tremendous courage knowing that you might lose your life in the process. So, but that when countries have deep-seated enmity, and the enmity is not just over territory, but it's also based on a narrative that has been told about the other side that is filled with misperceptions and different versions of reality, right? So what the Palestinian narrative of, the history of the Palestinian people and the land of Israel, which they call Palestine. And then, just our version of the story too, which we might think is more accurate than, much more accurate than a Palestinian story. We can understand how the Palestinians might argue with some points of that story, but still, nonetheless, it takes bravery for enemies of state to be able to sit down and talk to one another. Now, in this environment, now after October 7th, it's unclear when Israel is going to be willing to sit down with the other side again. So I think there's a difference between enemies of states sitting down with each other, and then individuals or leaders who profess immoral, unethical, evil values. Okay, so I think there is a difference. There is a difference between enemies sitting down with each other and talking to people who profess resoundingly evil ideas. So I'm not sure that there would ever be a time to sit down with a Hitler once he became chancellor to talk. But I'm not sure then out of a revolt against him, what would have been a way to discount that kind of evil. So that's where I really am not sure how to battle racism, and specifically how to battle anti-Semitism. How can I? So I guess I'll say this. After October 7th, I spoke about this in Shul on the High Holidays, about how my interfaith clergy group I found not to be supportive in any way about what I was going through as a Jew after October 7th. Only one or two people out of this group of 30 reached out to me at all. And then when I had a session in January to say, let's talk about Israel, it was far from anything that I expected it to be. It wasn't at all an open, honest conversation about Israel. It was rather a polite conversation, a polite professing of opinions about how terrible Israel is and genocidal in its approach to Gaza. So after that, I decided, this interfaith clergy group isn't for me anymore. So, so you try to talk to the other side, and then when you have to have the courage of your conviction to say, I just can't talk to you anymore, and try to figure out another way to combat this this what is now deep-seated hatred in our society. Julian, did you have a question?
Well, I mean, I think uh, one of the interesting things, and neither one of these people were evil, but Scalia and Ginsburg were
Uh,
close and on the opposite side of the
there you go. But again, that's about a view about law. Okay.
right.
So I don't. So Ginsburg never thought Scalia was an immoral person.
No,
She
no,
just thought that he just had a completely different view of law that led him in a completely different direction. And Scalia also didn't think Ginsburg was a terrible person. It's
no,
just that both of them respected each other's intellect and appreciation for culture. And so, yes, so that's a perfect example of people who are on the opposite side, who who could respect that the other could have their opinion about this academic topic that happened to be their livelihood, law, and sitting on the Supreme Court. They could respect each other for their intellect and for their intellect, while at the same time disagreeing with their approach. Okay, so it's like when it comes to Jewish law, you could imagine. I remember clearly when I was in rabbinical school, Rabbi Joel Roth, who was the dean of the rabbinical school when I entered rabbinical school, and a Talmud professor, remembers when there was a professor of Talmud named Shaul Lieberman, who was like a world-renowned Talmud scholar, revered and respected by all in the Jewish community, but he worked at the seminary. So that already labeled him as not Orthodox. Even though his personal practice was Orthodox, he worked at the Jewish Theological Seminary, which meant that he was conservative, so he's the other side. But Rabbi Roth remembers that the chief Sephardic rabbi of Israel would come in the middle of the night to meet with Dr. Lieberman in his office to discuss matters of Jewish law. So the Sephardi chief rabbi of Israel at the time, Ovadia Yosef, was a halachic scholar himself and wrote many collections of halachic responsa. And the fact that he was willing to go and meet with Lieberman, though it was the middle of the night so that nobody would see, but still understand that Lieberman had this academic wisdom and needed his opinion. So for subjects like that, people are willing to talk to somebody on the other side. But I think
you raised the question, how do you talk at this point? And the way it's happening now is through intermediaries,
right.
and you have to
So
start with intermediaries.
right, so that could be the way to do it is through intermediaries, right? That's how Israel and Hamas are talking to each other through intermediaries to try to settle the gain the release of the hostages, right? So Israel is saying both of them are able to say that they're not talking to the other side. I would never talk to the other side, but you're talking to the other side through an intermediary. So recognizing that the need to find a solution. So that would be the thing today is to try to find intermediaries who are willing to try to bring an end to this horrible mudslinging and also professing of evil ideas from on. So anyway, so that's what I wanted to share this evening. I thought this letter by Larry David was brilliant and was worthy of discussion. Like I said, no session next week because of the congregation board meeting. So on June 12th, again, it's the rabbinical student Ariel Dunat who will be talking with us and be in dialogue with us about the rabbinical school today, like who's in the student body and the future of challenges facing the conservative movement going forward.
May the 12th, not June.
Oh, that's right. Sorry. I was thinking May 12th. It doesn't always, what I think doesn't always come out of my mouth. So, yes, May 12th is our next session. All right. Have a good night, everybody.
All right, thank you, sir.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Good night.